Hello fellow space enthusiasts. In total there are 7 photos from the first moonwalk that contain Neil Armstrong in them, but how many of them are you aware of? Unfortunately, the photos with Armstrong in them are not of the same quality of those of Buzz Aldrin. Let's take a look at the reasons for this. Before jumping straight in, don't forget to subscribe so that you can see when a new Apollo video is launched. When we go to a new place, we often have a photo taken as a visual memento of our visit. These kind of pictures are standard on a holiday, but for all of their preparations, it was never part of Armstrong's and Aldrin's training to take these kind of tourist type photos of each other. This is unfortunate because for the first moon landing, they would have been more than just nice reminders for the astronauts. They would have been part of the visual record for posterity of this historic achievement. As Aldrin later explained, Neil had the camera most of the time, and the majority of pictures taken on the moon that include an astronaut are of me. My fault perhaps, but we had never simulated this in our training. The crews were trained to take photos to record data, and so every planned photo had a reason for taking it. For example, even the famous boot print photos were taken for a specific reason. Some people have erroneously claimed that Aldrin took these photos on a whim, because of their aesthetic quality. But in reality, these photos were taken as part of the soil mechanics investigation to record the cohesiveness and adhesiveness of the lunar regolith. Richard Underwood, the NASA supervisor for space photography, who has been described as the man who practically ran the photography department at NASA at Houston, said of the photography training, "It was quite informal. We wanted it that way, and the crews wanted it that way." He also claimed that the training was not work, it was all fun. Underwood's approach to training seems very different to Aldrin's no-nonsense approach, so it is entirely possible that this led to a clash of personalities. Aldrin is known to have ruffled the feathers of a few people, and so Underwood's relaxed and self-confessed fun attitude to training may have been jarred by the highly motivated and serious nature of Aldrin, leading to Underwood taking a dislike to him. If this personality clash did exist, it would explain what happened after the mission, something I will talk about later on in this video. Before the mission, the surface team had conducted run-throughs of their moonwalk, and from these they had established a nominal timeline. As part of these practice runs, the photographic duties of the 2 men were incorporated into the timeline. Armstrong said, "Buzz did have the camera some of the time and did take pictures. It was in the flight plan." He added, "We each had assigned objectives that we were supposed to catch. I think we probably caught a fair share of the things we were supposed to take pictures of." Chris Kraft, the director of flight operations, said of the photographic assignments for the moonwalk, "There were all kinds of scientific reasons to take pictures and all kinds of plans to take pictures of the lunar landscape, but I don't think there was ever any game plan to have them take a picture of each other." This oversight in the planning was confirmed by Brian Duff, the head of public affairs, who admitted, "These kind of touristy snapshots were not programmed into the timeline." Taking a photo of Armstrong for PR purposes was never made a specific task for Aldrin, and during the moonwalk the ground never asked for one to be taken because, as Duff explained, "We all believed we were getting photographs of both men." Between them, both Armstrong and Aldrin only took one photo of Michael Collins during the entire mission, which goes to prove that superfluous pictures of crew members were not high on Apollo 11's photographic agenda. Charles Duke would say of this attitude to the surface photography, "Overall, on Apollo, I'd say probably the biggest mistake we made was, on the lunar surface, not taking more pictures with people in them. There's a lot of rocks. We got a lot of rocks, but not too many good pictures of people." John Young's response to this was, "Well, that's our job, was to take pictures of rocks. They didn't want pictures with people in them. We had to take 5 pictures per rock." It should also be remembered that from the 865 exposures taken during Apollo 8, there is not one single photo of any of the men who made the first journey to the moon. When it came to the matter of dividing up the workload for the moonwalk, Armstrong was tasked with collecting samples and taking photos. He stated, "I had the job of taking a lot of the pictures. That was part of my assigned responsibility." Ironically, it is because of this that the most well-known photo of Armstrong on the moon was taken by himself. For the most part, Aldrin's tasks, such as demonstrating his mobility in front of the TV camera so that the ground could observe him, did not require him to have the camera. In fact, during some of his tasks, such as deploying the experiments, it was Armstrong's job to record Aldrin's work with photographs. Apart from the documented sample collection, which was abandoned, There were no tasks that Armstrong conducted that required Aldrin to record him with photographs. When it came to Aldrin's tasks compared to his own, Armstrong said, "I suspect that he was having more fun than I was, because I was hauling rocks at the time." When he did have the camera, Aldrin had specific photographic tasks to carry out, as detailed in a special article in the Amateur Photographer magazine dated the 16th of July 1969. A man actually on the moon will operate a camera. All the Earth is agog to see the pictures he takes. It goes on. Aldrin joins Armstrong after 30 minutes, photographs lunar module in close-up, especially legs, footpads and soil displaced by braking rockets. Photographs samples of lunar surface before picking up for return to Earth. It doesn't say anything about capturing for posterity a photograph of the first man on the moon, something backed up by Armstrong, who stated, "I don't think Buzz had any reason to take my picture." Time goes fast on the moon. This is something that all of the surface teams discovered. As Armstrong pointed out, the primary difficulty that we observed was that there was just far too little time to do the variety of things that we would have liked to have done. Before the mission, the astronauts had conducted practice runs to calculate the time of each task, and then they formed a nominal timeline to work to. The plaque unveiling and the flag raising were not included in this timeline because the decision to include them came so late. So late in fact that the plaque and the flag were not added to the lunar module until the morning of launch. The President's phone call was another item not included. As well as the ceremonial duties, the late inclusion of a close-up camera from Kodak meant even further time being taken away from their planned activities. Armstrong said of the camera's late inclusion, "It was an inconvenience and a new addition that we had to work into the timeline. With so many items not included when they were actually carrying out their moonwalk, they fell behind." When Aldrin asked where they were in relation to the timeline,
Houston, how does our timeline appear to be going?
Capcom Bruce McCandless replied,
Roger, it looks like you're about a half hour slow on it.
Aldrin was under intense pressure to get everything done, and that around 600 million people were watching his every move and listening to his every word. He was acutely aware of this and admitted that he found it intimidating, and he states that this gave him tunnel vision because he didn't want to make any mistakes. He noted that during his time on the surface he had the constant worry that we'd never accomplish all the experiments we were scheduled to do. Under these time restraints, even some of the planned objectives didn't get done. The plan had been for the two men to work together to perform a 30-minute documented sample collection, but in the end this was reduced to Armstrong spending about 10 minutes conducting a solo undocumented sample collection, while Aldrin collected a core sample. Even the placement onto the lunar surface of an Apollo 1 patch, 2 Russian medals in memory of Yuri Gagarin and Vladimir Komarov, a silicon disc with goodwill messages on it, and a replica of the olive branch on their mission patch were almost forgotten. With less than a minute left before his own time out on the surface came to an end, Armstrong asked Aldrin, who was now back inside the ascent stage cockpit, about the items. Aldrin had forgotten about them and still had the package of mementos in his sleeve pocket. In the end, instead of having a small ceremony, Aldrin threw them down onto the surface, and seconds later Armstrong stepped back onto the footpad, bringing the first moonwalk to a close. When the surface team were outside of the spacecraft, they only had one Hasselblad still camera between them to capture what they were doing. Aldrin's assigned photographic responsibilities meant that he only had the camera for a short amount of time to take photos associated with specific tasks. This reduced his freedom to be more spontaneous and regard the camera as something he could use at any time to capture photos of opportunity. He was no tourist enjoying the sights with a carefree attitude to snap off photos of his companion at will. As Aldrin noted, there was certainly a gun barrel vision of focusing in on what you were supposed to be doing, rather than being innovative and creative. With more time with the camera, Armstrong enjoyed greater freedom to be spontaneous, as demonstrated when he decided to cross the 196 feet between the lunar module and Little West Crater. In all, this photographic excursion took about 3 minutes and 15 seconds, and further demonstrates the difference in his mindset when it came to taking photos as opposed to Aldrin's. Armstrong was able to take photos of opportunity, and he freely admitted that he knowingly and deliberately left the planned working area out of TV coverage to examine and photograph the interior crater walls for possible bedrock exposure or other useful information. Having only one camera restricted the taking of photos and was something that was remedied on all future Apollo moonwalks. From the moment Armstrong attached the camera to his RCU at the start of the moonwalk to the time he removed the magazine from the camera at the end of the moonwalk, the one Hasselblad used on the surface was operated for a total of approximately 1 hour and 45 minutes. In addition to this, the camera also spent about 13 minutes on the Mesa, when neither astronaut used it. During the time it was operated, Aldrin did spend some time with it, as confirmed by Armstrong, who stated, "There was a short time in the middle where I transferred the camera to Buzz and he took some pictures."
I'm now in the area of the minus Y strut. Taking some section photographs.
During Aldrin's total surface time of 1 hour and 46 minutes, he used the camera on 2 separate occasions. The first time he had the camera, he used it for about 16 minutes. The second time he used the camera, it was for about 9 minutes. So in total, Aldrin had the camera for approximately 25 minutes, and during that time he only took photos that had been pre-planned, such as panoramic sequences and photos of the lunar module structure.
Buzz is making his way around the LAM, photographing it from various angles, looking at its condition on all sides.
He didn't take a single photo of Armstrong. The 6 photos that he took, that do include all or part of Armstrong's extravehicular mobility unit, are as a result of Aldrin taking a photo of something else and Armstrong just being in the image. During Armstrong's 2 hours and 13 minutes on the surface, he used the camera on 3 separate occasions, totaling 1 hour and 20 minutes. Armstrong said, "I had the camera for a large fraction of the time and I had more assigned photographic responsibilities." During this time, he did take photos where Aldrin was the primary subject of the image, as opposed to him being in it either by coincidence or by accident. And that is why there are better quality photos of Aldrin. When it came to the content of the photos, Armstrong was apparently not bothered, stating, "It didn't occur to me that it made any difference, as long as they were good." In his biography, Return to Earth, Aldrin claims that Neil took a picture of me next to and saluting the flag. As we were about to change positions so that I could take his picture, Houston announced that President Nixon would talk to us. In reality, there were about 5 minutes between the time Armstrong took Aldrin's photo next to the US flag and the moment that Capcom Bruce McCandless asked the two of them to get into the field of view in front of the TV camera so that the President could talk to them.
Tranquility Base, this is Houston. Can we get both of you on the camera for a minute, please?
If there was something that did distract the astronauts at that precise moment, then it was a call from the Capcom. Both astronauts had been quiet for a couple of moments as Armstrong took Aldrin's photo, and so McCandless asked for a radio check.
Neil, this is Houston. Radio check, over.
All right, Houston, loud and clear.
Roger out.
Loud and clear, Houston.
Roger, Buzz.
It was following this call from Houston that Aldrin turned towards the lunar module, maybe prompted by the sound of Houston over the comms to get on with his work. This would seem to lead to the conclusion that the interruption made by the President's call didn't directly lead to Aldrin not taking Armstrong's photo next to the flag. But what the call did do, however, is take them away from their work. Armstrong had been busy preparing to start the bulk sampling, and he noted, "We were behind," something backed up by Aldrin, who said of the interruption, "And the Oval Office is just about to put us even further behind." Now, when this video started and I said that there were few good photos of Armstrong on the moon, there were probably some of you who said that's because of Aldrin. Aldrin was on the surface for about 1 hour and 45 minutes, during which time he operated the camera on 2 separate occasions, and yet there were no decent photographs of the first man standing on the moon. There are some who believe that the real reason for this is because of a grudge on Aldrin's part at being denied the historical first step onto the moon. Richard Underwood, the NASA photography expert, stated, "There's a simple explanation. Aldrin was really mad at Armstrong for seizing the honour of being the first to walk on the moon. Aldrin decided to get even with him. There was no way he was going to take Armstrong's picture." This was a personal theory that Underwood would peddle for the rest of his life. In answer to this accusation, Aldrin said, "To have somebody say that might have been intentional, How do you come up with a non-confrontational argument against that? I mean, that was just such a divisive observation, and Neil and I were never in the least divisive. John Yembrick, a NASA spokesman, refutes Underwood's claim, stating that it's 100% not true. He added that there are no good photos of Armstrong, because that was Neil's job. It wasn't a conspiracy. Kraft was even more adamant on the subject, saying, No, I don't think Aldrin would have been that devious. I would not accuse him of that. It should also be pointed out that Aldrin took this photo of Armstrong inside the lunar module after the moonwalk. On top of this, the first photo taken during Apollo 11, just over an hour after launch, was of Neil Armstrong by Buzz Aldrin. Not exactly the actions of a man boiling inside with resentment and determined not to take any photos of his commander. The final word on this matter should go to Aldrin, who has been so unfairly tarnished by Richard Underwood. Aldrin stated, "When I got back and someone said, 'There's not any of Neil,' I felt so bad about that." Underwood and his team had failed to make a photo of Armstrong, any kind of a priority before the mission, and during the moonwalk, no one in the PR team bothered to make it a point to ask for one. But there is another angle to this. All of the emphasis regarding Aldrin's so-called grudge ignores a very obvious question. Why didn't Armstrong ask Aldrin to take his photo? As Cernan pointed out, myself, if I had been in Neil's place, I would have said, "Buzz, take a picture of me, quick." Although time was a scarce commodity for every Apollo crew on the moon, on Apollo 12, Pete Conrad did in fact ask his fellow moonwalker Alan Bean to take a couple of tourist-type photos when he was standing next to the US flag. There were a couple of occasions when Armstrong could have asked for a photo to be taken. At one stage, when Aldrin did have the camera, he asked,
I want to get some particular photographs of the ball clamp area, Neil.
This was an ideal moment for Armstrong to ask Buzz to take one of him, but as Bean pointed out, Armstrong was focused on the flying, on the jobs that really made the historic mission successful. A photo of him standing on the moon didn't fall under that criteria for him. On this matter, Gene Cernan states, "Certainly Neil realised the significance of the moment, but he was not going to be so arrogant as to say, 'Here Buzz, take a picture of me.'" For those who say that Aldrin didn't need to ask, that he should have simply just took one, they ignore the conditions that Aldrin was working under, and that he was spring-loaded to carry out his tasks and not divert away from the plan. As Alan Bean pointed out after his own experience on the moon, it's hard when you train doing these things step by step to quit doing them and just wing it. This is borne out by the fact that Conrad and Bean had planned to take a photo of themselves at the Surveyor spacecraft by using a timer they had taken with them to the moon, but unfortunately they couldn't find it when they needed it. When they later found it back at the lunar module, it never crossed their minds to take one there, and that's because in their minds that had not been the plan. Instead, they simply threw the timer away. In a 2005 book by Andrew Smith called Moon Dust, the author states that at one point Armstrong actually called his junior over to snap him by a commemorative plaque he'd just unveiled, but the lunar module pilot hilariously barked back that he was too busy. The only comments that these could relate to are ones made immediately following the plaque ceremony.
Ready for the camera? I'll get it. No, you're taking the TV on him.
Is this Armstrong asking Aldrin to take the camera off him so that he could have his photo taken beside the unveiled plaque? And was this Aldrin refusing to take Armstrong's photo? It seems more likely that it was simply Armstrong asking if it was the right moment for Aldrin to take the Hasselblad camera off him, and Aldrin was doing nothing more than telling him that it was time for the TV to be taken out to its new position away from the lunar module. In this instance, it appears that Smith is making a leap of imagination, trying to make the evidence fit the crime. There are no really good photos of Armstrong standing on the moon because of a number of factors. The training consisted of taking data gathering photos and didn't include tourist-type photos. Despite the planning of the photographic tasks, Richard Underwood and his team failed to highlight the need, due to its historical importance, for a photo of Armstrong to be captured. Aldrin's tasks did not require him to have the camera for the majority of the time. The times he did have the camera, he was only scheduled to take photos of the lunar module or the surface. Having only one Hasselblad camera coupled with Aldrin's focused mindset when it came to his photographic duties, as well as the tight timeline already filled with too many things for them to complete, meant that he had less chance to take photos of opportunity. Finally, neither Armstrong or anyone on the ground ever asked for any to be taken. So while Armstrong's name is recorded in the history books as being the first man on the moon, it is usually Aldrin's image that is shown. Armstrong's take on this was one of apparent indifference. When he did comment in public, it was usually to laugh it off, as demonstrated when he joked about Aldrin. He's a lot more photogenic than I am. The fact that there are no good photographs of Armstrong on the moon make the images that we do have of him even more precious, as shown by the attention given to the golden visor shot. In it, Armstrong can be seen standing beside Eagle with the Earth overhead. If this had been an image in its own right, taken by Aldrin, then there is no doubt that it would have been one of the most amazing images of the 20th century. Perhaps it is fitting that just like the explorers of old, we have this painting by fellow astronaut Alan Bean of Armstrong unfurling the stars and stripes on the lunar surface. What are your views on this? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for future videos, and thanks for watching.
Hey, that's great.